So I'm going to start off with just a general question, and this is for everybody, or for all of y'all, as we say in Texas. How you first started this idea of integrating your faith with your business life, and what sparked that journey for you. So I'm going to start with Bill, our preeminent panelist. Bill, would you like to get us started this morning?
That I was to go live in China for him. And we moved in 87. At that time, you couldn't have your own company, so that was nowhere on the drawing board. I thought maybe I'll get 2 years of language work and then get a job with an American company. That would be a strategy. And then the laws changed 2 months after we arrived. And so they allowed foreigners to have their own company. And so I checked in with the Lord and got a green light. And so we shifted and put in an application to get a company. They said it'd take about a year and a half, which we thought the longer the better. We weren't ready. And maybe I could finish the 2 years of language, we get a company started and try that avenue. And then the license came back in 30 days approved. And so we were a year ahead of schedule. And the only thing that we've done right is we haven't quit. But I would say all other decisions are debatable.
You got to lay the groundwork and the foundation in your faith and in your identity first. And that's actually something that, on a personal and spiritual level, the Lord did with me first before He had me start pursuing more into business. And I think that that's a big part of it is if you know who you are first in the Word, you're going to know who you are when you're managing the people that are underneath you, because they're coming to you from all walks of life, all cultures. They're coming to you from all economic backgrounds. You have no idea what hurts are in their past or are not there. When you come to a negotiation table, you're looking at, okay, what am I actually dealing with? And more often than not, it's going to be an intentionality of the heart. And so this is where you take your faith and you apply it in the business world, and you see that. And so I think that as I was growing in my own faith, the more I was seeing the need for it, the more I was dealing in business, the more I was seeing that this is such a very important field of mission.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. I guess in my circumstance, it goes back to my background with Chick-fil-A. It's steeped into the whole DNA of the organization. And so as I left Chick-fil-A a dozen years ago and went over to work at the chamber, um, I'd been with them so long, it just kind of that's how you're supposed to do it. And so um, I, I'll be honest, I didn't overtly say, I'm going to implant this mission on this new job at the chamber. I was more as authenticity and creating an environment where people felt safe to express their faith without feeling it's imposed on them or anything. So it's been a very interesting kind of journey in that regard. But I'd really just say, with Chick-fil-A background and all, I'm just dumb enough not to know any better, and I know just enough to be dangerous. And so I'll take chances. Um, Sometimes not even realizing I'm taking a chance. I've had tremendous influence on my background that kind of set the stage for the current journey that I'm involved in with the chamber. Um, but I guess that's one other thing. So during COVID, everybody's beaten down. We can't meet. There's so many questions, no answers, high stress. Um, I just really felt like we needed some prayer. It was a beat down emotionally for the entire business network, that whole community here in South Lake. And so, I'm like, let's give it a whirl, see what happens. And we did one on Zoom, and about 8 people showed up on, oh, nobody yelled at me. Let's do it again. And from that humble beginning, we now on the first Tuesday of every month have a prayer breakfast. And it's one of our higher attended functions. It's grown and we'll have 60 people show there. A lot of them C-level execs, business owners. Um, so there's kind of a need for some nourishment in this area, kind of underneath the surface. But since I'm not in a church environment, I'm not at Chick-fil-A anymore. I'm kind of out in the wild. Um, I've had to really kind of finesse making people feel comfortable enough. And also, there's not just Christians that when you go to the chamber functions, you go to Gateway, that's who's going to be there. Go to a chamber function, all denominations, faith, and everything else. And so it's been a great and fun journey for me, trying to balance that where everyone felt welcomed and respected, no matter where they kind of were. So it's hard for me to frame it as this is my mission in the marketplace, what I'm doing at the chamber. It's kind of goes back to more of my wiring. And the more I focus on having people trust our organization and feel safe and respected, appreciated, the more this thing tends to work. And so we've been on this great run. It's led to a partnership with TKU. I'm here in front of you today. But that's kind of how it all kind of came about a little bit for me and my job.
Thank you. Andrew.
I was sitting in a swivel chair in my corner office as the newly minted president of OM here in the US, chatting to the leader of our work in the Muslim world. I had spent all my adult life either in the church or the mission agency, and we were just having a conversation. I had finished the strategic planning process with an outside consultant, was pretty proud of the plan to come up with how we would send more traditional missionaries out into the world. These were people that I believed were God's answer to reaching the world for Jesus. They were specially called, highly trained, quit your job, raise support and join a group like mine and go do this thing called ministry. And in that conversation, he said two things to me, and this was not so much a realization of business that could possibly be mission. This was a crisis of belief that was about to happen for me, because in that conversation, he said two things. I say that the first put me on my heels, the second put me on my butt, if I'm allowed to say that in a Christian university. I'm sure there's other things I could say, but the first thing he said, there'll be no traditional missionaries in the Muslim world within 10 years. And we went on to talk about the access problem, right? And I, in my own sort of innovative entrepreneurial way, thought we'll come up with more creative ways to get in. And he said, no, but Andrew, it's not about access. It's about presence. And this is what put me on my butt. He said, the Filipino maids, so these are women that left the Philippines for economic reasons, are now working in the homes of the sheikhs of the Middle East, looking after their families, looking after their homes. He said, the Filipino maids have done more for the spread of the gospel in this part of the world than all of the traditional missionaries put together. And I had no framework to understand that. So I went on this journey. My question was, what else, if I have missed this, what else have I gotten wrong? And that was the journey of a reframing of what God's mission in the world was like and who he wanted to use, how he would use them in the world.
Amazing. Thank you all. Thank you for getting us started there on your own journeys and some of the passions that God has put in your heart about this. So I'm going to ask some questions specifically to each of you. Excuse me, because I know you all have varied backgrounds. So I just thought, let's pull out something that that explores what God has done in your specific story. So, Bill, can you share a story of God's work in your China-based business? Well, get us excited. Tell us some of the things that you have seen, and I'm sure you could go on for a long time about this, but maybe share a highlight, a recent, something that sticks out in your memory about something the Lord has done through your business in China.
I want to go back to what we heard about where it's oriented around people. People are going to be core. I have something called the 400-year rule, where I pretend it's 400 years down the road, and I'm evaluating today's decisions based on that vantage point. And people always rise to the surface, and money always sinks to less important position. If we often make a decision based on money in business, and it probably shouldn't be that way. So I'm walking home one night. This was early in our experience. It's a dark alley. It's about 5 houses away from my home. And someone tugged on my shirt. And I turned around, but nobody visible was there. It doesn't mean nobody was there, you know. So there's a doorway that was open, and it draws my attention to it. So I look in the doorway, and there's a little lintel. It's about 6 inches tall that you step over to get into the room. And there's a little face down there. And I squat down, and I see it's a little girl. She was 8 years old. Her mom discovered, as she had polio when she was very young, that she was useless. And so her mom actually put her in a little wooden boat and pushed her out to sea to get rid of her. And somebody recognized her and brought her back home, and then her mom put her in the garbage can and just threw her away and walked away, never came back. So the lady that lived in that room heard her crying and took her out of the garbage can and raised her. And and we became friends for the next 10 years until she got out of high school. And then I told her that we were hiring people who could use Corel Draw, and she got a teacher. And she entered the company at that time on an entry level based on her skill set. Today, she's running my entire enterprise from a wheelchair. It's about people. The Christians went to her and said, "Hey, are you a Christian?" And she goes, "I don't know what that means." "Well, do you know Jesus?" And she slowly nodded, "Yeah." "Well, how do you know Jesus if you don't know if you're a Christian?" And she said, "Well, he used to sit with me on the lintel in the afternoons." And then I remembered I got tugged on the shirt. I'm so glad I answered that. On another occasion, we learned that the Lord does favor the downtrodden. And so we learned to pay attention if he ever gave you a nudge to speak to someone. We think you only get about 4 or 5 seconds to act on his nudging, or you'll miss the opportunity. And so for a number of encounters with beggars on the street, we brought a number of them into the company. And they formed what we call Bob, a band of beggars. It became a division that would help. At that time, we made stained glass lampshades, and they helped the other production teams be more productive and actually make more money. And so the non-disabled actually respected the disabled for helping them be more successful. And one day I was on the other side of town, and I ran across a guy who had literally been run over by a train when he was 8 years old, and everything 6 inches below his belt was gone. But he lived. And now he was using a kind of wide skateboard and selling pornography and selling gambling stuff. And I, had a little conversation with him. And then I went to the company the next day, and I went to Bob, our band of beggars, and I said, "Hey guys, you free tomorrow night?" And that was going to be a Friday night. And they said, "What's up?" And I said, "Oh, I want you to go meet somebody." So that Friday night, they all, 4 of them, loaded into my car, and we went to the other side of town. And we went and found this guy, and they all started sharing their stories with him. And he entered the company, became a believer. And we had the beggars. Have you ever heard the gospel, just one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread? We actually have the beggars doing that. It's really kind of fun. It's very authentic. And so the city is 20% bigger than Los Angeles. And they had heard about this and talked about it in the city council meetings. It's a communist country. It's a little unusual. And so on the day, there's an International Day of Recognition of the Disabled. And so I had 3 government officials that came to my office unannounced, and they said, "Well, we want to know why you do that, why you help these people." And I just said, "Well, a long time ago, I met a new friend, and this guy was so good to me. I just couldn't believe it." So I asked him one day, "Is there anything I can do to just express my appreciation?" And I felt like he said, "If you get a chance to help people, just help them." And so they were in my office for an hour and a half. We had a glass wall, and one by one, 3 of the folks came across on their crutches. And so I called them in and had them tell their own story. And then after the hour and a half, I was taking them to the elevator to say goodbye. And one of the government leaders leaned over, and she goes, that friend of yours, that was Jesus, right?" And so just by paying attention to the Lord, it's all about it's his deal. Just follow him. Just get really tuned into him and just be instantly obedient, and it all just flows out of that.
That's really good. It's interesting you brought something to mind, Bill. Sometimes we think about business, we think about money and affluence and gold, right? But you really brought it back to business as people and serving the people the Lord brings to you. How many of you have opportunities to serve just the down and out in your business? There's lots of opportunities to reach a lot of different strata in society through businesses. Amen. Let me pop back over here, Andrew. Let's give you an opportunity to share more from your experience. Can you give some examples, some stories of people living missionally in the workplace? How might that work out?
Yeah, maybe give a little pretext to this that I even hesitate to share one story because it can look like many different things. But I'll give you Luis's story. Luis actually moved his family to another part of the world. He was from Latin America, and he was a director in an IT company. And he went there to take on this position to help the company move forward. And he was really good at his job, and he knew that he was doing his job as unto the Lord, and that was his heart and his desire for being in that place. When he went into the company, he quickly picked up that the culture was rather toxic. The people were fighting with one another. The jobs weren't really getting done as efficiently or as effective as they should. And so Louis stepped in and he called everybody together and started to teach new values to this company on how they should work together. And of course, those values were biblical principles that he lived by, and now he was teaching these folks to live by. And that slowly but surely, the culture in the organization started to change, as did the efficiency and effectiveness of the company, and they continued to improve in their market share of that particular place. And in that process, of course, those he was working with, both locals and people from all different parts of the world, many parts of the world where Jesus was less known as well. He had the opportunity to live this out in front of them. And one by one, these workers would find him in his cubicle or in the lunchroom, and they would start to ask him questions about why he lived the way he lived. And of course, he had the opportunity to start to talk about the one he followed. And during his time there, some of these workers started to follow Jesus, and others coming towards Jesus. That was up until COVID. And during COVID, a lot of the foreign workers of these different companies were asked to leave. He got a phone call one night, and there's a lot more to this story than I have time to share, but he got a phone call, and it happened to be one of the sheikhs of the country. And he said, Luis, I hear that you're planning to leave. You've been told by the government you have to leave, but can you give me 24 hours? Don't leave. He said, we've been watching your life, and clearly you are here for the good of our country. You've improved your company's serving our country better, the way you live your life. Your wife, she taught English to some locals. We're watching your life, and your life is truly being lived out for the good of our place. And we like that. And we also know you're a follower of Jesus, but we actually need to know more about Jesus as well. So would you please not leave until I call you back within 24 hours? He gets a call back the next day, and they said, we need your expertise to help us navigate the tech space as we respond to COVID, and we're offering you a job to stay on. That's a small snapshot of what I believe living missionally looks like. It's working for the good of the city. It's representing God in every space, every place we inhabit. It's doing good work, not simply doing good work so that something else might happen, give us a platform to do something else, but doing good work because doing good work is what we were created to do. And through doing that, allowing the glory of God to be reflected in that space, and believing that the glory of God is incredibly attractive. And it draws people in because they see something that they long for and don't have.
Very good. I love that verse. The good works God has prepared for us ahead of time, right? Sometimes we think it's like serving in a church or something like that, but as Andrew, you brought to mind that those good works could be the good works that you do as your work. You're a skilled engineer, and it seemed like a very providential time for him. With the skills he had, the place he was at, it just opened up a door. Great story, great story. Lauren, here, hold this for me, Lauren. Would you? Thank you. I only got two hands. Okay, so as an entrepreneurial type, okay, I'm gonna call on you as our expert entrepreneur here. What would you say are some unique opportunities for small faith-based startups? And I'm so impressed with this young generation because they seem so entrepreneurial to me, right? A lot of the kids that we see today, it's like they don't want to necessarily start a church, but they'll start a business, they'll start a coffee house, they'll start a brand, they'll start a social media enterprise. I mean, so I'm just kind of curious your take on what are some opportunities for people that are entrepreneurially minded, maybe not traditional ministry, but they've got a heart for the Lord, a passion for the Lord, and they want to use their unique, passion for kingdom purpose.
That's a really good question. I think there's multiple different tracks with that. Like, if you are on the ministry track, there's a huge need for business leaders and entrepreneurs to have pastors that are specifically for them. That support in the church is not necessarily there. And the things that they face, like sometimes their family is not even on board with what they're doing. They want them to go work someone else's field. And God's called them to do what they're doing, but ultimately, or their friends don't understand, because entrepreneurs' minds are wired so different. Like, they are wired to be, I would call them the righteous risk takers. If you look at people like Elon Musk, he lived in his office with his brother. And when one slept, the other worked. And when the other slept, the other one worked. And he showered across the street at the YMCA, because paying for his office space and the vision of the business that you now enjoy the fruits of seeing Tesla all over our metroplex and over our country was worth it. And I think there's a longevity that comes with that. And so if you're on the ministry track, that's something I would be praying about, thinking about. If you're on the business side of things, opportunities to apply what you're learning, or what you have from your local church, or even from, global ministries, is look at where the issues are. We have a significant issue in paying people what they're worth. And we have, when you have business leaders that are afraid, economically afraid, and they are not seeing Jesus or God as a provider, that's a big problem. And that's where we can apply that word ministerially. That's where, when we're building businesses, we're building it on the foundation of the Word of God. It works. Nothing's new under the sun. God has seen every business rise. Kings and priests, He rises them, and they fall based on how they handle what is given before them. If they can steward small, they can steward big. And so when you're building your business and you are looking at applying entrepreneurially, I think there's two things that go hand in hand. You have the support of the ministers, but also being a minister in business in and of itself is important, because you're applying what you know. I have seen Christian people who have said Christian business, and they do not apply what they believe. And we're called in the Bible to be different, to be set apart. We're to look peculiar to the world. And in that peculiarness, it's actually operating the way that God calls us to operate. And I have seen people claim that on their businesses, but they act no different than the world. And so the opportunities in building a business and running a business and developing new concepts and ideas, my question is it biblically, like, where does the biblical line up? What are you doing that's different than the last business that has been out there that has slapped Christian all over it and then taken people's money and not given them anything in return? Every opportunity when you're building a business or when you're coming in contact with people is to say, what can I do to serve them? What is the actual need here? Because you're not just serving the practical side. You're not just serving the monetary side. Yes, that's transactional, that's true. But Jesus always comes with solutions. And so when you are an entrepreneur, it's definitely looking at what are the solutions I'm providing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and also transactionally in that business with them. Because they're coming to the table with a lot, and so are you.
Amen. I appreciate that. I had mentioned one of the first things that God did in Scripture was create work, right? But what was the very first thing God did in Scripture? He created, right? We have a creative impulse, I think, from God. He's the creator of the universe. We're made in His image. And I think entrepreneurs, to me, sort of reflect that creativity in the business space, right? They want to start something new. They're risk takers, righteous risk takers. So God bless the Christian entrepreneurs out there. Find a need. I think that's a very, very good word, Lauren. Find a need, not just a new app, right? How many new apps do we need? I mean, do we have enough apps already?
We do.
Can we come up with something that really serves people at a deep need, not just, letting them let their minds waste away for an hour or two? Okay, enough of that. And all right, let me skip back over here to Mark. All right, so Mark, hold that for me for a second. Oh, okay. There we go. All right, we're playing juggling microphones. So Mark, what everybody here wants to know, as a manager of Chick-fil-A, and again, I know this is your past life and you've moved on, but we're so interested. I'm interested. I've never actually had a deep conversation with a previous manager from one of our favorite chicken joints. I mean, come on. This is an opportunity for all of us to really get sort of a peek behind the scenes. We all love the chicken sandwiches. We all love the Chick-fil-A sauce. We love being greeted with my pleasure. We love those fries. But tell us, so how does a corporation like Chick-fil-A, and I'm not even sure what they're worth. I'm sure they're their market cap is in the billions. But how do they maintain Christian values in daily operations? What are some of the things as a manager that uh, that you heard from corporate, that you instilled in your people, that sort of kept that culture, right? So it's not just about operations, it's about the culture. It's the values, and we see ourselves differently than other corporations. So besides being closed on Sundays, how would you say Chick-fil-A went about kind of inculcating a culture of Christian values?
Great question. Very good question. Um, the farther the leader is from the actual front line interacting person with the customer, the harder it is to carry that culture. And so Chick-fil-A, it all started right at the very top. Um, Truett Cathy, he modeled the behavior he wanted us to model. He, people don't know this. He taught eighth grade Bible studies all the way till he passed. He thought it was a critical age to influence people as they're growing up. So back at the stores, the corporate purpose at Chick-fil-A is to glorify God by being a faithful steward to all that's entrusted to us and to have a positive impact on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. And any company that's got God in the third word right there, they're speaking loud and clear. So as I got there as a new team member, I kind of knew what they stood for. They're closed on Sunday for a reason. But what I discovered, especially when I was new, it's somewhat self-correcting. And so what I mean by that is, as the new guy, you go through your interview process and all, you get the job, and then you kind of let your hair hang down a little bit there as you're hanging out with the other team members and stuff. And I don't even remember what I said, something inappropriate. Maybe the customer was an idiot or something. But I got lit up by the rest of the staff like, we do not do that here. If you're going to work with us, that's just not how we do things. I was stunned in the moment there because I was like a teenager. It's like, whoa, okay, all right. So I got a taste right off of the bat, just kind of how the heart of the organization was really kind of pre-wired into it. So as I became a Chick-fil-A operator, going through the process, they were very diligent in making sure that I truly understood what they needed from me and my role in keeping not just the chicken correct, sales up, all that stuff, but in preserving and protecting the culture that had been built by Truett Cathy. And Truett Cathy's Bible verse, his life verse, is Proverbs 22:1. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. I'm sure most all you know that. So they made it clear to me as the operator of one of their stores that I was the guardian of the brand. And that is more than just serving good food and being polite to people. I was there to help Truett Cathy continue his vision for where the company was going. And it had a profound impact on my behavior. And so we obsessed on growing our good name, growing our good name. As long as people love us, they'll always come back, and we're doing the work we need to be doing. So now I cross over, I'm out into the wild, like I said, but at the Chamber of Commerce, and I carried that with me. We continue under the radar with people not realizing it to chase 22:1. The reason it's such a good job for me, and I felt after I got there, was what do you do at the Chamber of Commerce? You want people to know, like, and trust you. One by one as you go to meet people. So organizationally, you're growing your good name. So it was a really, once I kind of came out realization, it was easier for me to have more focused input. But if you as the leader are in ongoing communications with your team member, you're meeting their staff regularly, it's being reinforced, then the culture has a chance to stick. And over time, it starts to develop a sense of pride that we've got something a little special. We don't want to screw it up, you know. And that's heavily in play at Chick-fil-A for sure behind the scenes. So I guess to conclude that thought right there, it's extremely difficult for the culture to go through your mid-managers to your lower manager to your front member to your team member. And you just have to remind them all the time, whether it's meetings, seminars, workshops, it's baked into the whole process. So we do have to be a little bit more subtle at the chamber, but it's the same thing there. And it's attracting people. Some of my chamber friends are here in the room right now. It's kind of a spin-off. They have no idea Truett Cathy is influencing them by even being here today through me. Um, but it starts at the very top. And if the leader's behavior doesn't model what they're pushing, it fails. And that's the key thing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love that phrase that you said they told you when you were a young employee. We don't do things like, what did you say? We don't do it like that around here. You could all remember that one. You could tell your young employees, we don't do it like that around here. And I also love from your story too that you were part of that culture for a long time, and that influenced you, and now you're taking that influence out of there. Do you ever think about your employees and how you're pouring into them as a Christian leader and what they might take in the future as they go out from your business, right? Because they might not be with you forever, but how are you taking this moment, that this season that you have with them, whether they're a frontline person or a middle manager, and what are they going to take from you and your business that they are then going to pass on to others, right? I think we have, I'm going to preach just a little bit here, but I think we have so few really good leadership role models. And so we have people that come into churches and businesses and they've never really seen good leadership before. But if, as Christian men and women, we can model good leadership and they're like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be like. I'm supposed to be conscientious. I'm supposed to be respectful. I'm supposed to be gracious. I'm supposed to care, right? Instead of like, well, this is just my job and, you know, it's not my job, kind of that laissez-faire attitude that people have. All right. Thanks for that little bunny trail there. But thank you so much, Mark. This is all of you guys. You guys are sharing some great insights here. All right. We're going to throw it back to Bill. You ready, Bill? I got a humdinger for you here. Not a humdinger. I think Bill could wing this whole thing by himself and we'd be just fine. Discuss the challenges. All right. What are the challenges of blending faith and business cross-culturally? Because you sort of mentioned, you didn't say it right out, but I think the Chinese government might have an issue with a Christian business person coming there. So how do you sort of deal with that dynamic when you're sort of, you're trying to be under the radar, but you still got a clear mission? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Just the fact that it's in another country probably multiplies the difficulty by tenfold. You've got to get a new language, you got to get a new culture, you got to understand, and it's so easy to trip up and say things that offend people, and you don't know that that's offensive. I mean, it's just much harder. The flip side of that is, have you ever noticed that if something is really hard, you'll trust on the Lord more? So that becomes a good positive. So now you're so far in over your head, you've got no choice but to start walking with the Lord at a level you may not have ever done before. And when you do that, then you get the result of that. So we say that we want to focus on investing in the relationship so we get relational equity. And if we get enough relational equity built up with the Lord, we start getting some relational dividends. And that's when he delivers you through whatever your challenges are. And so we tried to hide and stay under the radar. And in a sense, by staying really small in the beginning, we started with 5 employees. Our goal was to not be noticed. And that wasn't unwise for a while. But then when we realized the government's talking about us in their city council meetings, I don't think we hid very well. But it turned out to be a real positive thing. And so I realized, oh, maybe trying to hide is actually the wrong strategy. Maybe just walking with the Lord and letting him handle all of that is a much better strategy. Like Andrew, in your story about the shake, it's like, I think we're trying to not be noticed by those guys at the top, but sometimes it really is what needs to happen. It really helps.
Excellent, excellent, very good. So speaking of Andrew, let's throw it back to you, brother. So what advice would you give? Thank you. So let's just say, if I'm an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, it's easy for me to see like that would be a very marketable skill. But what if somebody thinks, I'm really not a professional in that way? You sort of talked about the Philippine housemaids and how they've made such a great impact. But what advice would you give for somebody who doesn't feel like their skill set is all that professional or worth sort of journeying into, sort of to be missional?
Wow, there's a lot of ways I could come at this question. I think one of the ways, first off, just came to my head when you were asking it is I think one of the things we need to point out right away is missional is not a geographic. Uh, it's not dependent on the geography where we find ourselves. We were created by our Creator to bear His image in the spaces and places He put us, and He's uniquely shaped us to fill different spaces, to go different places. And so I think this question, and I've wrestled with this, I've heard this question, I want to validate the question, and many people feel that the vast majority of the population might put themselves in the ordinary job category. But I think part of it, the fact that we even have this as a question, exposes a fundamental flaw in how we've presented missions and missional living. We've often told the extraordinary stories that we fail to see the potential in the ordinary. And I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts we have to make in this space, is that the reality is that what we're talking about when we talk about missional living is living the way of life that we were created to live as the image bearers of God on the planet. And that means whether I'm carrying out the role as a father, as a brother, as a husband, as a neighbor, as a player on the soccer team that I play on, or the people I rub shoulders with in my dog show world, wherever I'm at, in each one of those spaces, my sole responsibility is to reflect the goodness of my Father in that space. And so seeing the potential in the ordinary is really, really important. So I would say is that if the space that you're in has the potential, has anybody or is something or someone that you can care for or cultivate, that's the space where you get to represent God. If the space or place you find yourself in has a whatever connected to it, then that's the space you can live missionally. And what I mean by that is Paul says, whatever you do. Do you know what that word whatever means in Greek? Whatever, right? That's a pretty broad statement. Whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And at the end of the day, reflecting the glory of God, the goodness of God in the world is our purpose. And that's a purpose you're not called to. It's a purpose you're made for. And so we can fulfill that in the every ordinary day of life. I want to finish with my part with a story, because it's another Filipino story that I heard. I was sharing the story I just shared with you, and a Sudanese brother came up to me. He's the leader of a large network of churches in the Middle East. And he said, I have another story for you. And he said, I got this. He has a TV and radio program that he goes out all over the Middle East. And he said, I got this phone call from a sheikh. And he said, I want to come and be baptized. And he got so excited that the Lord had used him to reach this sheikh. And he said, sure, but you'll have to come out of the country and meet me somewhere. And I want to hear the rest of your story before I'll baptize you, but let's go. So he meets this sheikh. And one of the first things the sheikh sits and tells him, he says, now, I need you to know right off the bat that it really wasn't your message that drew me to Jesus. He said, well, tell me more. He said, well, I run a company, and in my company, at the very bottom of the ladder, was this group of Filipino women. And he said, every time I looked at them, they had a joy that I didn't have. And they loved one another in a way, and they loved their other co-workers in a way that I didn't as the boss. And they had a kindness about them. They had a peace about them. And he started to list off all of the fruits of the Spirit, the evidence of God in somebody's life, the way we reflect our Creator in the spaces we inhabit. And he said, so I saw this and I was drawn in, but of course, as the sheikh, I would never talk to these ladies. But when I heard you give that message on the fruit of the Spirit, I knew that God was real, I knew that Jesus was real, and I knew that I had seen him alive in the lives of these Filipino ladies. And therefore, I want to follow Jesus. Amen. And it was the ordinary living of these Filipino ladies, just being who God had made them to be, showing the fruit of what that looks like in the most ordinary of jobs, that drew this sheikh to the Lord. So there's nothing too ordinary, no space too ordinary, no job too ordinary to reflect the goodness of God.
I love that. Thank you. It reminds me of what St. Francis once famously said, right? Go out and preach the gospel today and use words if you must. right? Our lives should preach the gospel. And I think that witness of those ladies and your clear sharing of the world. Are you saying, Andrew, that there's a sheikh out there who's a follower of Jesus right now?
There are many sheikhs that are followers of Jesus.
Wow. How many of you knew that? I didn't know that. I didn't know Dave Mustaine from Megadeth was also a believer either, but what do I know? That was for you heavy metal fans out there. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to ask one more question here, and I'll let any of you guys, any of you folks, answer this, and then we'll do some question and answer from the audience here. So if you got a good question, get prepared to answer ask that. So as you've integrated, and this is for anybody here, Bill, Lauren, Mark, Andrew, as you've integrated your faith into your business, what's one insight or transformation that you've experienced that really surprised you or deepened your understanding of what it means to do business in a kingdom-minded way? What's something that was like, I was not ready for that. God just blew my mind. Uh, you want to take that one?
This one actually has happened, I would say recent in terms of like the past year or so, or actually the past couple of years. And I think that one of it is there was a situation that I was in, and I was being asked to do something, and it went against the word. And in that situation, I had to respond, and I had to ask, okay, so you're asking this. And so in the response of what I gave, I think first off, the ask was surprising because it was another believer that was trying to make their business run, and they're trying to have like all of the fruits of their labor, be fruitful and profitable. But in the ask that they were asking went against the word. And so one of the things that has surprised me with my faith in business is understanding that there's the way that it needs to be given to each person is different, and the reminder of like what you believe is different. And what I mean by that, and I want to clarify because that could be misconstrued. With this particular ask, I actually had to say back to another leader. I said, we can do that, but it would be stealing. We could do that, but it would be, and I started listing off what all of those things were. We could do that, but you'll lose relationship. Is that what you want to do? And I had to ask questions because Jesus does ask questions. And I think I was most surprised at the response that I had to give. I think I was most surprised because you would expect that other believers, there is a ideology that I have come in contact with, not with everybody, but with some, that if they're a Christian, they are only acting a certain way. But I think there's sometimes that you have to remind other believers of when they went to the cross, when they laid down their life, and when they said, Jesus, you can have it all, what that actually looks like in the practice of business. And the different leadership responded to me and they said, I don't want to do that. I said, right. I'm not going to do that. And I think it's also taking stands. I think that's been another thing I've had, is where I've had to take stands. And even if that means that I'm coming in and I'm agitating them, I can deal with that because there's a point in which I said yes to the Lord. And leadership is a weight that is carried. And I will be held responsible for what I say and what I do. And there's some people that need it tough, and there's some people that need it soft, and there's some people you need to pose the question, is that actually what you want to do? And so I think that that's what I probably have been most surprised about. I don't think I expected that. And then also in building businesses or building one is taking, I think the other thing that's probably surprised me the most is like maybe persecution or flack or maybe lack of acceptance, because what I'm particularly doing goes totally against typical church culture. Typical church culture, I think, when you go into women's ministry, is very much about being married and children, and that's okay. If that's what they're called to, that's okay. But I think that I've also been surprised at like what it looks like to go into a business ministry group, which there's not very many of them, but they are. And I've had experiences by following that faith and trying to be with other believers. Um, and the experiences I've had that some have not necessarily been positive, but standing in the room where it happens, and being willing to say, you know what, God called me to this. This is what I'm going to do. And if that means that that defies what the typical cultural expectation is of me, then that's okay too. Because it's being okay with who you are, because you know whose you are, in applying who you are in the word, in business, and in relationship.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's unfortunate. Um, business women are making great strides in business and leadership, but you're saying you're still facing a little
Oh,
bit
yeah.
of like, what are you doing here?
I have been laughed in a room.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
Yeah.
founder of Foursquare is Amy Semple McPherson.
Oh, yeah.
Over 100 years ago, she faced the same sort of
Yes, she did.
ostracized by church leaders who were mostly men at the time. So I'm sorry
Mhm.
to hear that 100 years later, y'all are still facing that.
Yeah.
But thank you for pressing in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who else would like to answer that question? The most surprising, transformational thing you've encountered. Bill, you want to take one more shot here?
Um,
Or another shot?
yeah, I think the most transformational thing that stays with me was the proximity that you feel that Jesus and you share, the closeness. I didn't realize he would stay so close. And I think because I developed a definition of a steward from the stories of the talents and the minas. And the Lord reminded me that those are technically Old Testament stories. They occurred before the death and resurrection of Jesus, kind of in the Old Covenant section. And if you add John 17 to that, now the master doesn't give resources and a command and go on a journey. He gives resources and a command, do business, let's do it together. And then you really go to work together. So his presence actually surprised me. We've gotten over 150 machine designs from the Lord. He's done all kinds of financial things for us and personnel things. And we're just always kind of able to operate beyond our skill set. It's kind of manifesting. It's not that we're adequate to consider anything as coming from ourselves, but our adequacy is from Him, who makes us adequate for all things. In the Greek, for that is all things. And I was
You're getting a
shocked at
Greek
how
lesson
real
today.
that was. Just like in a financial sense, I know we're not focusing on money, but our little operation brought in over $87 million in salaries to the people that we wanted to bless. And that little girl in the wheelchair kind of oversaw a distribution of $2.1 million in the last 5 years just investing in the kingdom. Just a little operation. So we're all operating beyond our skill set.
Amen. Well said. Mark, Andrew, surprising, transformational stories? Anything you got? Any more Greek for us, maybe? Hebrew?
I don't know, transformational, but surprise. Okay, so went out a little bit on a limb and subtly started expressing faith through the chamber, through events or moments with people. Maybe I tell them I'm praying for, maybe they'd say they're praying for me, whatever it is, very subtly. So my previous chair of the board is of the Hindu faith. They're born in India, lives in the United States, very successful person. Love him to death. All of his friends are so great. Um, a little concerned, maybe I might be pushing a little boundary here because I was already doing a prayer breakfast. And not only did that chair never miss a meeting, but he would bring his friends. And now he's no longer the chairman of the board. He still doesn't miss one. And so my fears were wrong. I learned that out of that not to fear, but still do it properly so that it's not in the face. And anyway, I just thought that was a really, really nice thing that through what we're doing, we're nourishing people of other faith indirectly, and they're responding positively. I'm not expecting any conversions here, but we went out on a limb, and rather than having it chopped off while we fall to the ground, it was supported by even non-Christians. And so I thought that was really
That's
a
a great
great
story.
twist.
That's an amazing story. Andrew?
I think it's more of a transformation in my thinking moment, and it's many different influences. Some of them have been people like Bill, who I just got to meet today, although I've known about him for years, but some of his peers that have blazed a similar trail in the business as mission space. And one of the constant things I've heard from them is, and seen in them, is their patience. And I think one of the things in modern evangelicalism, there has been an urgency to getting the message out that has often caused us to cut corners in the kingdom of God. Now, there's a lot behind that, and I don't want to get in too much trouble just by saying that, but I think Jesus tells us that the kingdom is like yeast, right? And that takes time to mix and to rise. Someone else said it is that for us, often in the West, in the evangelical world, we're all about carbonation. We want bubbles right away, and the kingdom is about fermentation. And there's a wonderful book that spells this out by Alan Creeder called The Patient Ferment of the Early Church. It's a wonderful picture of just being faithful and loving and caring for people and going on that journey and trusting the Spirit of God to work in those moments and being obedient to lean in and speak in when necessary. But one of Bill's peers, a man called Patrick Lai, told me that when his experience in the Muslim world was that it often was year 7 before you would have those conversations, those deep conversations about faith. Can we be patient in our businesses, in our life, wherever God has us, just to faithfully show up? Be always ready, but realize that the kingdom is like yeast, and you're the yeast, by the way.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. You know, when Jesus passed, there was a handful of believers, right? Maybe 12, maybe 120, we don't know. But by 300-ish AD, Dr. Cole, correct me if I'm wrong, 16 million believers. That's yeast. Yeah, there were some revivals along the way, but the kingdom grows slow and steady. I love that. Well, I ran out of all my questions. How about you guys? Do you have any questions for any of our panelists? If you have a question, maybe raise your hand. You want to do the roaming thing, Dr. Cole? Thank you. All right. Dr. Cole will hand you the microphone. Amy back there has her hand up.
This question is for Mark, specifically about Chick-fil-A. On your application for employment, do you ask specifically if the person has a preference of faith and if they attend church regularly? And do you also ask about their living environment?
I have been out of the company for about 10 years now, but I'll speak from experience, and the answer is no. There's nowhere on the application, there's no requirement that you be a Christian or say that you are. In fact, I'm not even sure if that's legal, to be honest with you, but people kind of know when you apply at Chick-fil-A kind of what they stand for. The corporate purpose is on the wall in most dining rooms. People know their clothes on Sunday. So as far as on the application or applying for a job, Chick-fil-A is in the rural world. You know, they're out there on the streets of America, and they're hiring people that live everywhere from all different kind of backgrounds. And so through the interview process, you can discover a lot about a person if you know kind of some of the right questions to ask. You can and you can pick up on it. But more than one interview is another important thing. I would interview them, or then some of my managers would, and there'd be a process and all. For me to get my own store, I'd worked for them since I was a kid, and now I'm out of college. I'd been 7 or 8 years. They still sent me out to the desert to run a couple of stores for an entire year to make sure I was serious, that I wanted it. So with Chick-fil-A, you know what you're getting into. They have so many different layers of things, but you're not going to ask inappropriate questions of people of that nature. Typically, they reveal it on their own by how you ask. You know, tell me about yourself. Sometimes they say things that you don't want to hear. You know, or there's a variety of different things that you can pick on people's attitudes and stuff too. What do you like to do in your time off? What's fun for you? But it's general stuff where you're probing around, so you're starting to get kind of a grasp of kind of where they are, maybe as far as values and morality, because you know sometimes they'll give it up and ruin the interview for themselves. But there's a lot of laws that you have to follow, so it's more of how you craft the questions and then listen to what they say. And of course, check their background. Some about the Chick-fil-A home office, you put your second grade teacher on there as a reference, they will call that person and talk to them for at least an hour on the phone and ask them about what's the worst stuff, best stuff you ever did. Um, but vetting people, if you don't vet your people, you kind of accept that people will kind of sneak in that you probably shouldn't have hired. And one last thought, people on their best behavior for the interview, they want the job. And so you can only keep that up for a short period of time before everyone relaxes and becomes their natural self. So I hope that helped to answer the question there, though, but it's a cautious process.
Did you ever have an interview where somebody would say, well, good thing you're closed on Sunday because that's when I go to church?
From time to time.
They're really trying to. Okay, we have another hand. Let's see. Why don't we move over this? Okay, where do we have hands? Okay, right next to Amy there, David.
Okay, I don't have a question. Actually, I just felt like I wanted to share this verse as I was listening to everybody talk. It's Colossians 3:23. Says, "Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people." So.
Great verse. Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, this gentleman up here, David. Dr. Cole.
Lauren, you said a few minutes ago that the entrepreneurs need pastoral input, pastoral oversight. So for those that have business owners, business entrepreneurs that have captured this essence of business's mission, which we used to think was just overseas, having planning a business, but really there for the kingdom. And now we're seeing more of that in the marketplace here, particularly in the U.S. What is the role of the church in pastoring those entrepreneurs?
I'm really glad you asked that question because it's a very, very needed question. I think when you're looking at what the role the church can play is understanding that while we have traditional biblical values, that everyone, going back to what I said earlier, that everyone has a calling. And there are people who are called to the marketplace in a very big way. And they start local, and then they become all over the state, and then they go national, and then they go globally. And so I think when you're looking at what role can the church play in this is I think that it's probably working with business leaders on all different levels, because depending on if they're in the local sphere and that's their focus, that's going to be very different than a global business leader because of what especially executives, it's going to be entirely different. I think that what I've seen, and I'll give you an example, there churches I've attended in the past, the demand for serving has been high, and everybody has different schedules and different times. But the demand was so much that I didn't feel like I could be a part of that, because I'm having to watch something online because of the level of hours I'm putting in, building my business with my business partner who's here. And in addition to working full time, I'm doing that full time and also another leadership role as well. And so when you're looking at that, what can we have for business leaders where they can do a 6 o'clock in the morning online Bible study or something, or some sort of gathering that doesn't, hinder their work if they're local. Or there's a really great entrepreneur, and he's Kingdom, named Pedro Adeo, and he does the gathering every morning on Monday mornings. But he is talking business with them, and he's also showing business in the Bible and going through that. So if you're looking at what a local church can do, how do we provide support for entrepreneurs and also executives too? Because people that are in the executive space, they are time blocked, 15 minutes. Elon Musk does it down to 5 to 15 minutes per thing that he's doing. And they're not going to be able to serve in their local church every Sunday or every Saturday or every Wednesday night for that matter, depending on what's going on. And so there is a need to still be connected to to your faith and community. I have personally experienced, recently I went to a conference and I had met somebody who was in a pastoral role, and I got the verse, well, you know that there's a verse that says you shouldn't forsake the gathering. Well, what they're asking of me is even more, because what the Lord is giving me to, we're talking about Bill talked about stewardship, Mark talked about stewardship, Andrew talked about stewardship. What the Lord is giving me to steward at the moment is where I'm called to, is where I'm placed. And so how can I be a part of something that's going to support what I'm doing, who understands the struggles in entrepreneurship? A lot of people do not realize that when you seek funding, you may give up a percentage of your business. Or how can we do something where there is funding for entrepreneurs, or there is emotional support, or there's spiritual support for them in what they're doing, because what they're doing is not easy. Like, no part of it, and it's not always glamorous too. I want to make sure I make that point. It's not always glamorous. A lot of times entrepreneurs will face people saying, you need to go work somebody else's field, you need to go get a W-2, you need to go work for this big company, you need to quit this foolishness. But because they're persevering in what they're doing, you get, things like Tesla, and you get things like Google, or things like Apple, for that matter. And when you look at how can the church be a part of that, is I think making things accessible to those business leaders, depending on what level they're at. If they're on executive level, their time is money, their money is time, and they are stewarding a lot of people. And if they are stewarding multiple businesses, they can't come and do what you're asking them to do. But if you can steward their time, and then you can have curriculum or things like that that are geared towards them specifically, how to remember, like I said, I'm in contact with reminding even business leaders, hey, this is what we need to do. You need to remember what the word says, because in the industry of business in and of itself, there is a demand to act like the world. There is a demand to behave that way. And so if you have more opportunities in terms of Zooms, in terms of things that they can attend all over the world, no matter where they're at, and it's all collective and connected, and depending on what level they are in their businesses, that would help tremendously, because no matter where they are in the world, I've traveled internationally pre-2020. I would be gone. I'd find out a friend was expecting a baby, and by the time I came back, that baby was already walking. So, like, it would be a huge amount of time. And when I would do that, like, I would have to try to watch something online when I was doing that. Or I'd have to try to go to some church in England that, and I don't know anything about this at the time. I'm like looking, because the stuff wasn't really a thought. And so when you're doing that, and I was part of big conferences, and I was doing all of the marketing stuff for that, and some advising. So, yeah.
Yes.
Is TKU looking at how the church and business integrates and how you serve each other?
Boy, what a wonderful question. I love that. As a matter of fact, we have a whole program devoted to that. I oversee it. It's called our Masters of Organizational Leadership. And it's really ideal for business leaders, ministry leaders, executive positions in a larger church. So yes, we are cognizant of that. We are serving those leaders. And if that's something that any of you would like to talk about, I'd love to help you. We're visioning in the future. I can't really say anything, but there may be a business major somewhere in our future for Christian business leaders. So again, that was Frank Markow. That was not on our strategic plan anywhere. Do not quote me. Do not enroll. But we'll see what the Lord does with that one. Well, listen, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our time. We probably have a lot more questions we could engage, but we're a little bit over. I just want to thank all of our panelists. Can we just give a hand to Bill, Lauren, Mark, Andrew? Thank you guys for coming. I think I almost feel I shortchanged you guys. Each one of you could have carried a session like this on your own, and I'm so grateful that you came out and shared. But you know what? Can you stick around for a little bit afterwards and maybe greet folks? If you have any questions, come on up and say hello to our panelists, get to know them a little bit, and continue to be blessed. I think that's all we have. Thank you guys for coming. Yeah, give it up for our panel today. Please go by and say hi to our admissions folks over there. Learn more about the King's University. God bless you all. Thank you for coming, and you are dismissed.